Next topic. Canada's foreign policy clown show continues. Canada took back 41 Canadian diplomats from India, out of India. They took back those diplomats. Here's what Canadian Foreign Minister Melanie Joly says. As of now, I can confirm that India has formally conveyed its plan to unilaterally remove diplomatic immunities for all but 21 Canadian diplomats and dependents in Delhi by October 20. This means 41 Canadian diplomats and their 42 dependents were in danger of having immunity stripped on an arbitrary date, and this would put their personal safety at risk. Canadians watching may be wondering what this means for our operations in India. There's no question that India's decision will impact the level of services to consulates in both countries. Unfortunately, we have to put a pause on all in-person services in our consulates in Chandigarh, in Mumbai, and in Bangalore. After this, MEA, Ministry of External Affairs, the Foreign Service of India, MEA issued statement. We have seen the statement by the Government of Canada on October 19 regarding Canadian diplomatic presence in India. The state of our bilateral relations, the much higher number of Canadian diplomats in India, and their continued interference in our internal affairs warrants a parity in mutual diplomatic presence in New Delhi and Ottawa. We have engaged with the Canadian side on this over last month in order to work out the details and modalities of its implementations. Our actions in implementing this parity are fully consistent with the Article 11.1 of Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, which states the following. In absence of specific agreement as to the size of the mission, the receiving state may require that the size of a mission may be kept within limits considered by it to be reasonable and normal, having regard to circumstances and conditions in the receiving state and to the needs of the particular mission. We reject. This is the continued statement of Ministry of External Affairs. We reject any attempt to portray the implementation of parity as a violation of international norms. So Canada tried to victim blame and they were crybullying. India didn't take it. Canada-Israel relations. PM Trudeau said Canada is taking the time needed to investigate carefully beyond the preliminary evidence before reaching any final conclusion. Contrast this. This is about the hospital story. Contrast this to what Biden said to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. Based on what I've seen, it appears as though it was done by the other team, not you. Biden told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So when it comes to taking evidence about India's involvement, Canada just took evidence from the Five Eyes, particularly the United States, and they just said, yeah, we believe this evidence, this is credible allegations or whatnot. But when it comes to taking American intelligence on Israel not bombing the hospital, Canada said it is taking the time needed to investigate carefully beyond the preliminary evidence before reaching any final conclusions. Maybe they decided to wise up and decided, maybe United States intelligence evidence is not as credible as as they portray it to be. Maybe we need to be careful from now on. Or maybe they are just playing politics. They just want to appease the progressive. Maybe the Prime Minister Trudeau wants to appease its progressive voter base. And maybe Israelis did it or whatnot. That's what they're trying to portray. We don't know if Hamas did this. Maybe Israeli did this. Maybe Hamas did this. We don't know. That's what they're saying. This will affect Canada's relations with Israel. Last one. Canada-China relations. China almost shot down a Canadian surveillance plane off the coast of China. The surveillance plane was on a UN mission for surveillance of enforcement of sanctions against North Korea. Chinese fighter jets carried out dangerous and reckless interception of a Canadian military plane over international waters, Defense Minister Bill Blair said. China on Tuesday blamed Canadian military plane for seriously violating China's sovereignty and national security by entering its airspace. Of course, at first I thought, why would China interfere with UN mission? But then I remembered Saihar's story about how US planted bombs on the Nord Stream pipeline under the guise of Baltop's 22 NATO exercise. This probably isn't the first time there was a UN mission for surveillance of enforcement of sanctions against North Korea. The fact that Chinese had to send fighter jets against a surveillance plane means there's a chance that the surveillance plane was doing something other than surveillance of enforcement of sanctions against North Korea. Or at least Chinese became suspicious that the surveillance plane was doing something other than surveillance of enforcement of sanctions against North Korea. Canada-China relations are already terrible. There was a viral video out of G20 summit of 2022 in Indonesia, where President Xi Jinping schooled PM Trudeau about leaking private discussions on camera. This was probably just Chinese sending warning to Canadian surveillance plane. Imagine if China actually shot down the surveillance plane. Canadians were already accusing China of interfering in their elections. Imagine if this had escalated further. I don't know what's going on with foreign policy of Canada. Just for domestic politics, they are just exploiting at causing all sorts of trouble with the foreign policy. That's terrible idea. That's just terrible. Especially in a globalized economy, you want to improve diplomatic relations as much as possible, not make them worse. Unless you want to destroy your economy as well.